What is up, B.FAM? Today we have a special episode today over a topic that hopefully not many of us deal with, but it is one of those topics that I wanted us to address here on Enjoying Your Blended Family, because I know personally our family was affected by this, and there are many of you out there. And that is when you have a blended family who live in different states, either you or the other biological, your co-parents, whatever, your stepchild, they're living in another state. And now you're having to not only maneuver the co-parenting, which comes with all the difficulties that it comes with, you have to add in the distance, which changes the name of the game. And so today, my guest, Joslynn Flowers, she's from the Daily Stepmom. She's a podcast host as well. And she's going to be on here talking about her situation and what happened when they went from living in the same area and then they chose to move across the country and all that came along with that. So I'll introduce you to her in just a second, right after this.
When we first became a step family, just like you, we didn't quite know what we were getting into.
Scarlett and Randall Tandy here from Enjoying Your Blended Family, and we have been a blended family for over 15 years. And not only did we have to figure out how to handle the day-to-day struggles that come with being in a step family, about 7 years in, our biggest fear happened and each of our kids went to go live with their other parent.
We went through seasons of zero connection with each one of our kids, and we had to get really creative on ways to reestablish and reconnect those relationships.
And through prayer and becoming very intentional, God restored our family in true God-like fashion and made it better than we could have ever imagined or hoped for.
So God has called us to help other families do the same thing, to make those connections. So if you're looking for stronger relationships, deeper connections, and more communication, then we believe it truly starts with being intentional and creating these fun opportunities in our family.
Click the link so that you can get quick access to the process that we use to help you find common interests in your family so that you can be more intentional on spending time with your kids, your spouse, and your family as a whole.
We believe you can take the step out of step family and create a blended family that you truly enjoy.
You can find our podcast on Enjoying Your Blended Family on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And while you're sitting there, go ahead and follow us on social media.
So when you have more fun, you'll see less problems.
All right, we are back and we have Joslynn here. And Joslynn, will you just start out by telling us a little bit about your family dynamics as a blended family? What makes y'all unique and special in your family?
Yeah, hi. Well, thank you for having me. So I am a full-time stepmom to three. What that means is that I am the mom that they live with full time. So we don't get the every other weekend, 1 week on, 1 week off split schedule. They are with me every day. And then we added an ours baby, my husband and I, and he's 4. So we just are a hodgepodge, 4 kids, husband, dog too, might as well add that in. And yeah, just a little blended family.
So, and I can relate to yours a lot as well, because that's how it was for us. We were basically the full-time parents and the different situations, because my stepdaughter did live in another state while we were raising her. We had her the majority of the time, except the long extended holidays, long extended summers. But that had its own, it was different kind of challenges than a lot of step families have, as far as having to share so much custody. But then at the same time, it came with its own issues because of how long she would be gone at the holidays that we would miss out on, because anytime she had a long span of time, we let her go and spend that time with her mom. So hopefully we'll get into all of that and what that looks like because now you've seen it both. You've lived in the same town, right? Were y'all close in proximity where y'all lived before?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, same town and everything. So, what you're describing, this is all new to us. We're just now embarking on what that's going to look like this year with the holidays approaching. So, but prior to that, I mean, we actually never really had to share holidays, being that we lived in the same town. The kids wanted to share Thanksgiving, Christmas Day, Christmas Eve with us. So we just kind of had it worked out to where she'd get them a few days prior to celebrate, and then we would have them the day of. So we, I mean, we are a blended family, but I just think our dynamic and um, what we've gone through, sometimes it doesn't necessarily feel like a blend, just because of the way that we've had them full time. When we received full custody, full physical and legal custody, they were very young. So I really have had the opportunity to raise these kids, help raise these kids, and be kind of the constant mother figure in their life.
Yeah. How long have y'all been blending?
Um, let's see. I feel like I should just know this off the top of my head. We just celebrated, so it'll be 6 years in
Okay.
April that we've been married. So 7 years of our dynamic. It's interesting because even when I met my husband, when we were dating, he had the kids full time. His custody schedule was 80/20. They had joint physical at the time, or I'm sorry, joint legal at the time, but the physical was 80/20. So when I started dating him, I came in to full responsibilities. I mean, our dating life was, I'd go to his house after work and we'd cook dinner and I'd do dishes and, say goodnight to the kids and read a bedtime story. Like that was our dating life. And
Wow.
when the kids would go to bed, we'd sit on the couch and talk for hours or watch a movie. So I really did come in and kind of just hit the ground running. And that was 7 years ago. We got married 6 in April, and then October of that year. So what, a few months after we got married was when we were granted full physical and legal, awarded that. And then I guess before that, October and July, we got a temporary full physical and legal. And by October, a judge had approved that it was full time. So it really, from the beginning of our relationship, it's kind of been a full time role for me.
Wow. And so it was basically like they would go do like the every other weekend at their
Yes.
mom's, and
Yeah. So
sometimes when it worked
yeah,
out.
our situation, unfortunately, there was a lot of craziness in the beginning. It's funny because you always hear that phrase of like, oh, you know what you were getting into. And yeah, I mean, in theory, I think I knew I was getting into being a mom, a stepmom, a mother figure to someone else's children. And I knew like that's what I would be doing, but I didn't realize the level of stress and anxiety and kind of high conflict situation that would unfold when when my husband would have him, the kids, it was like they would go stay for like a few hours. They weren't allowed to actually have overnights when I first
Oh, okay.
met my husband. So anytime the kids weren't with us, it was more of like she'd pick him up and take him to dinner and bring him home. Or they would go to her parents' house. Just very, very minimal contact. Um, and then after we got engaged, we kind of were leaning more towards a 50/50. We were kind of hoping that that's what was going to happen. I was kind of hoping that was going to happen. I mean, realistically, I think about like looking back at how I was kind of naive in the sense that we didn't have much off time. So the whole honeymoon stage, we didn't really get. And so the idea of the 50/50 was really appealing to me because it was like, oh, we'd have a whole week to do whatever. Like we could travel, we could go out, like we could do whatever we wanted. And then we get them back for a week and we do that until we decide we're ready to add an ours baby. Um, but you know, that's just not the plan that was in store for us. But yeah, it was interesting when you look when we I can look back now and be like, whoa, like that. How how I agreed to marry my husband, I don't know, but it's
Was
pretty
it
crazy.
did it feel pretty natural though, as far as, I mean, because you go from not being a mother, and I don't know what your level of experience with other people's children and stuff as far as siblings or cousins, nieces, nephews, all that. But coming in and now these kids, like, you're caring for them in this way. Was that pretty natural, or did it feel forced? Did it feel like you were trying to replace mom, or did she feel like you were trying to replace her?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that last part, she absolutely felt like she was being replaced. And I mean, I get it. You have another woman who's with your kids full time. How could you not feel that way? I think anyone would feel that way. But I wasn't trying to replace her. I actually tried really hard to um have a healthy relationship with her, and work with her and communicate things to her. But it did feel natural. I mean, I come from a very big extended family, lots of cousins and older cousins with kids. I mean, we are a big family. So and I worked with youth at my church. And so being around kids was not anything that I was uncomfortable with, but there were definitely things where, you know, I made myself whatever I wanted for dinner. And when I would start making dinner for them, I realized, okay, you know, not every child wants to eat tofu, veggies, and rice for dinner. Like that's that's probably not the best dinner for them. So there were like those little things that I had to tweak. Or like this is one I tell often because it's funny now as an actual, you know, mother who has given birth. Or you know, and I should backtrack that. I would say a mother who's raised a child from an infant, because there are plenty of adoptive parents who have not given birth, but they've raised a child from an infant. There is something about having a child, you know, age with you as you're growing, feeding. So my son, my biological son, Declan, um, you know, he eats off my plate all the time. And I remember when I first met the kids, we had gone out to eat, and or I we were getting fast food. That's what it was. I hadn't eaten, so we were getting food to bring back to the house. My husband, boyfriend at the time, he asked, you know, does anyone want anything? No one wanted anything. They had already ate. When we got back to the house, both boys were standing next to me as I was eating, and they're like, can we have some? Can I have some? And we laugh about it now, but I remember looking at them and being like, no, you cannot. Dad asked you if you wanted some and you said no. And they both like, and then I mean, yeah, sure, you can have one, just one. But it's funny because when you have a child who, you know, you're teaching them to go from formula or breast milk to solids, what are you doing? You're ripping food off of your plate and handing it to the child. And so it's those type of things that I really missed out on with the older three. Um, that I see with my son, where I'm like, oh, okay, I can see how had I had the older boys when they were younger, if they would have asked for food, that would have been a no-brainer. Like, duh, why would I not have? But for me, it was like, no, why would you be asking for you dad asked you if you wanted some. And so it's like those little things that, you know, you're like, okay, that was the adjustment period.
Yeah, and it's funny, the little things like that, either that come, like, I hadn't thought about it, like how you were saying, like, it's part of the mothering, just the
The
natural
nurture.
process, right? Is to
Mhm.
give them that. And we were just laughing the other night about drinks and sharing drinks, because early on when we married, I was, you know, single mom for a little while. And even when I was married previously, my ex-husband was military. So I, you know, I was doing a lot of it myself, raising these two kids, and we didn't have a lot of money. So we shared food, we shared drinks. You drank from the same container. And I remember when Randall and I were dating, and we were going through somewhere, and I was trying to make, like, my stepdaughter share a drink with the kids or something. And he's like, no, we'll just all get our own drinks. And I'm like, how rotten, like, then you have to have your own drink. And we were laughing because we're 15 years in and we still don't share drinks. Like Randall and I don't share drinks. And I don't know what's normal or not normal for other people, but for him, sharing like that was not something that they did. For me, and we grew up without as much money, and so we shared a lot of things. And so
Right.
it's those different things that you just are instilled inside of you, and then you learn and grow and adjust in those things. So just moving forward now, because y'all were in the same area, and then it comes to a point where somebody gets a crazy idea or something happens where y'all are making a decision to leave California and move across country to North Carolina. So tell us a little bit of what stirred that up, because I know being in a step family, this is one of those things. It's not an easy decision usually, and it's not for us. It was so complicated. I always thought, like, why couldn't Riley's mom just come live in Texas? Like, it'd make more sense. Her daughter's here, but she has children by another father. And then she ended up with a fourth baby by another dad. And so for her to pick up and leave one area, she's leaving these kids or leaving their parents to come over to us. And then I can't just pick up and leave my kids or my kids' whole other side of the family as well to make it more convenient for Riley and her mom. So we really were just stuck in this situation. But y'all's is kind of like this opposite where you were together and then all of a sudden it's like, we're going to do something different. So tell us a little bit how that unfolded.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy when you break it down like that, right? I hear a lot of times, uh, when I'm coaching or just talking to other stepmoms, they do talk about the struggle of being in separate states and how difficult that is. So why we made that choice, I don't know. I think for us, it really boiled down to the fact that, well, let me backtrack. We'd been talking about moving. I personally have had the opportunity to live outside of California. So I knew that living in California was just not somewhere that I envisioned raising my family. I've always wanted to live outside of California. And so that was just always like in my heart. We had a conversation with the kid's mom multiple times about moving out of California. And she was very much for it. She was like, I'd move, it's cheaper in other places. She was not really tied to any sort of home or job or anything.
So
So
she was on board. She didn't have other
yeah,
kids or anything like holding her back. Just like, if y'all want to
nope.
move, I'll come. That was basically it. If y'all move somewhere,
Yep.
then I'll go wherever y'all move.
Yeah, or it was like, that'll just give me the freedom to also move. The only reason I'm still here is because the kids are here. Those were the kind of conversations that were being
Okay.
had. I don't know if she would necessarily have moved to where, North Carolina, but when we were talking, again, and you got to remember, like, we had a good communication at this point. There were other places that she and her spouse wanted to move, but she just felt like she could never leave because the kids were still in California. So it was always just like, if you move, that'll give me the freedom to move. Everyone will move. And, my husband was working. I was a stay-at-home mom. My husband was working excessive hours. If you're from California, you know how hard it is to just be living off of one income. And he really was missing out on a lot of the kids' stuff. And he hates when I say this, but I felt like I was a single mom of raising his kids. And I call them my children. I treat them like my children. But there was a little bit of like, I'm raising 3 kids that I didn't give birth to. Their father's constantly working. Their mother is doing her thing. And this is not even where I wanted to raise my children. So there was just kind of just me. I don't want to say there was just friction. It was just like we knew something needed to give. And we loved to travel. So we lived 3 hours from a major airport. There were just a lot of things that like started adding up. And we were like, we didn't want to look back at our life and be like, I wish we would have done this. And so that was the big factor. And then having the blessing from their mother, it really kind of felt like, and when I say blessing, we have full physical and legal custody. So, I mean, by law, like it really is our choice. But we wouldn't have made this move if she wasn't like, yeah, go for it. Like the kids will be happier. You guys will be happier. I mean, these were conversations that we had had. So we both felt at peace about it. And making that move. I know a lot I've had, and not like random stranger people, but friends and family would be like, oh, I can't believe you're making this move. You're pulling the kids away. It was not like that at all. Prior to even coming out and visiting where we live now, that we were like, we're going to go visit. She's like, yeah, let me know how it is. I mean, it was very positive, move forward, where we support this. So I can understand like being in the opposite of being like, why wouldn't that person just move here? And how it can look to the outside person of like, wow, you just like picked up these kids and moved them from their mom. Like, that's crazy. And yes, in a sense, I guess it could seem crazy, but again, we had that blessing. We had the go ahead.
Well,
So
and
yeah, so that was kind of our
in
decision.
normal like situations, you don't have to consider all that, right? If you want to
Right.
create your life, you can go and do whatever you want to do. And that's where this dynamic just gets a little bit harder. So I could
Right.
see definitely if y'all are getting the green light, yeah, go ahead. Be like, okay, yeah. So how amazing is this that we're not tied down? We don't have to
Right.
stay here. And to be able to the world is your oyster. What do y'all
Right.
want to do? Especially with just during this time frame. I know a lot of people are moving out of California because of the expense and stuff. So to feel like you're stuck somewhere
Right.
where in any of our life situations, right? Especially when your spouse is having to work overtime and all the time and not being able to be present in the life.
Yep.
I know I was a school teacher before I'm doing what I do now. And I was so devoted to what I was doing that I was spending all of my extra hours pouring into this job instead of pouring in
Right.
to our family. And so I understand how you can get up one day and your kids are getting older and you're like, maybe it's part of us just getting older, right? As you're rounding your 30s and coming into your 40s, like I am, it's like, oh, we're getting halfway through with our life. Is this
Yeah.
what I want it to look like? And so to be able to make that decision and say, yes, we can do this. We can, where do we want to, have our family and raise them at? And so y'all make this choice and you start to move, or there's some, which it sounds like there were some complications that came up in the situation of moving, things that were unexpected that just kind of like made you think, what the heck are we doing here?
Yes. Yes. When I tell you, I feel like I could be an expert stepmom coach for anyone going through custody and maybe living in a different state and trying to get more custody, or just I feel like I could write a book. I could be a lawyer at this point.
Do it.
But maybe not a lawyer, but you know what I mean? It was just, there was a lot. So, yeah, quickly things went from, please go move, the kids will be happier, to very toxic. She served us with a paper trying to prevent us from moving. But in serving us, it was very much like the reason why we can't move, according to her paper, was that my husband works all the time, and I, as the stepmom, rely on her to help raise the children because I'm out of town or sick or just unable to care. It was very much like, let's bash Joslynn and show that she's not able to care for my children.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was very like, wait, what? We just hung out. Like, where is this coming from? So that was very shocking. And it kind of just went downhill from there. Communication was very stale. Everything was like documentation per this, per that. And she basically wanted to fight us on moving, which again, I mean, you never know, right? I mean, let's really break it down. You have full physical legal custody, but you never know what the court systems are going to do. You hope that they're going to abide by legalities and the rules, but it's kind of just, you never know. So it was very difficult for me. I went from being excited to move to this incredible place that we had picked for the kids. We had told the kids, they were excited, to being probably in my darkest place ever. Feeling very insecure in my role, insecure in the direction of where we were going. I was angry because, yeah, I mean, you got to remember, we have an ours baby in all of this. And so knowing that I want to raise my son somewhere other than where we were, and feeling like I had that freedom and then it was like ripped from me, it was just very hard. And the kids felt the tension. We went from inviting her over and into our house when she would drop them off to like, you can't even walk to the front door, right? Like it was like all of a sudden there were some hard boundaries put into place. So they felt the tension. And it was hard. Even my son felt the tension. So yeah, it just turned real quick. And there were definitely times that I'm like, what are we even doing? But I knew in my heart of hearts that this was where we were meant to be. Every door was just like opening. And I had to just trust that we were in line with what God wanted for us and what was just meant for our lives. And sometimes that's the hardest place to be, right? Is just that trusting phase of the whole situation. You have to just trust things are going to work out. But yeah, it was difficult.
Is there, looking back now that y'all have gone through it, anything that you would have done differently in order to maybe keep any of that from happening or even moving altogether?
Yeah, I feel like hindsight's 2020. I mean, I feel like we definitely did our part to reach out and try to settle things outside of court, and to be realistic with expectations and custody schedules. And yeah, I do think our situation, a lot of it stemmed from her parents, because of our dynamic and what our custody schedule while we were in California was. All the visits were done at her parents. So she had one overnight a week and it was at her parents' house. She would get them 2 times a week after school at her parents' house. And from what I understand, prior to me coming into the picture, her parents were very hands-on with raising the kids. And so I think her parents, well, I think when they found out, I think it was probably very devastating for them. And I think they tried to maybe keep us here. So I think a lot of it stemmed from her parents kind of reacting to the fact that you're pulling our grandkids away from us. But like I said, we tried our best to settle outside of court, to be realistic with schedules, and unfortunately there was just no movement on their end. It was just kind of like, no, you're not moving. So I don't know if there's anything that we could have said or done that would have made things different. Unfortunately that was just kind of the way our story needed to unfold. But in doing so, I think it's allowed me to put some very, very healthy boundaries in place. I think sometimes like spin my wheels to try to be this perfect version of a stepmom that included her in everything. And I'm granted we don't live there now, so it doesn't matter. But I feel like even if we didn't move and there was something that would have happened, I just think I need to have health. I needed to have healthier boundaries and I didn't. Um, so out of all of this, I think that's probably been the biggest takeaway for me is to have healthy boundaries.
Yeah. Well, there's so many different things that I'm thinking of right now. Cause for one, like, what was your relationship with the grandparents? Because y'all were having to share a lot. Basically, you were sharing your custody with the grandparents, and they do have a lot of pull, especially they don't maybe legally. I think eventually you can have some legal stuff in there that you can fight for some grandparents' rights and stuff. But as far as speaking into the life of their daughter and like, you need to do this or you shouldn't do this, were y'all doing holidays together before? Like, were y'all interacting in a positive way?
Oh, absolutely. And I, her parents are incredible people. I think I mean, my mom was upset I was pulling the kids away, but I think, I think they wanted her to fight more than what she was doing. And so I think that kind of, it's like that pendulum, right? You're either all the way over here or you're all the way over here. And I think she went from, yeah, we'll move too, to like, oh, just kidding, you can't move at all. And um, but prior to that, I mean, yeah, when I talk about the relationship we had, and even now they still do this. My son calls them Nana Papa. Like that's he thinks those are his grandparents. And they are incredible people. Like I said, they buy him a gift at Christmas and they include him when they send cards. And I will forever be grateful of that because um, you're living on my son who looks at their grandkids as that's his brother and sister. Like he doesn't, it's not step, it's not half, like those are his siblings. And so for them to include my son, I will forever be grateful to that. um but that's why I say when everything kind of went the opposite way on the pendulum, it was very difficult. The kids felt it. We would show up at sporting events and my son like would want to go and hug them. And it's like they just felt the tension. And that was hard because we went from, I feel like, having a really good blend to, um, I don't want to say we don't, I mean, we don't have a blend anymore, but I think it's more of like the kids are the main focus and we're cordial. Whereas before I felt like I would literally have a conversation with them like nothing and everything was real. And now I would never just go have a conversation with them.
Oh. And so what is the kids' transition now?
Yeah, they love it. It's funny actually. Their mom is here visiting for 3 days. So they stay with her at a Airbnb. And prior to her getting out here, the kids said, "We love living here. We don't want to live anywhere else. We're happy we moved." They've adjusted incredibly. And it's funny because I had a lot of people tell me, you are doing a disservice to your kids. Like, how awful of you to pull them from the only home they've ever known. And I'm always like, Army kids move away all the
Yeah, people do it all the
time.
time.
Like, I think for me, I think I would be doing them a disservice living a place that doesn't make me happy. I think kids feed off of their parents. And if their parents are happy, generally they're happy. And so their adjustment, they've done really well out here. They all were involved in sports this fall and rocking it. They are getting incredible grades, honor roll. They have friends. They go fishing. I mean, my oldest lives in like a boy's dream. He can walk down to a pond and there's a big trees in our backyard. And I mean, he goes and does pellet shooting. Like those were the things that we couldn't provide them where we lived. And those were the things that we wanted to provide them. Just a different lifestyle. And so they love it. They're so happy. I mean, they obviously enjoy seeing their mom and their grandparents when they have that opportunity, which they stayed for 7 weeks during the summer. We moved out here and they stayed there. But yeah, they love it. They're so happy.
Oh, that's awesome that y'all are able to give them that experience now that they wouldn't have been able to get living in the other area. And so were there things that not necessarily the unexpected that came because you were moving, but now that you live in a new area and you don't have exactly the same support system, or now that the kids are traveling for longer periods of time, they're going to be away from y'all. What were some things, just for anybody that's listening, that's contemplating this and deciding like that you wish you would have known going into it?
Oh, gosh. As a stepmom, I think I wish I would have known, especially in my role, being a full-time stepmom. I felt like while they were gone for those 7 weeks that I wasn't a stepmom, that because they weren't in my home, that I kind of had lost that title. And it was interesting because it was just me, my husband, and my son. And so for the first time, I really felt what that I don't like the word nuclear, so I'll say first family, what a first family feels like for 7 weeks. And it was interesting. But I felt like I'm not a stepmom anymore because they're not here. And I was reminded by a friend that you absolutely are still a stepmom. And there are things that I'm doing for them behind the scenes here at the house that would, constitute as that role. I was helping getting their room set up. I was washing their sheets. I was hanging their clothes. Those I'm still a stepmom. I'm doing the things so when they come back to our home, their things are here. They feel welcomed. And I was like, okay, you're right. So I think looking back, just knowing that it's okay to not have them around for the 7 weeks, I thought maybe they would look at me. I mean, they all call me mom, so I thought maybe they would stop calling me mom. Like, I don't know what I thought. I think I just was in my head a lot. But it's okay for them to be away. They've never been away from me since I've been in their lives. And I think just having that, it's okay. They still love you. You still are a mother figure in their lives. They're coming back. It's okay to have that separation. So if you're listening and you're in this dynamic or things are changing for you, it is okay to be away from them. It doesn't negate your role at all.
And I would say too, it doesn't make it easy just because you didn't birth them. You have been
Yeah.
raising these children. You have been caring for them. Your heart is for them to be healthy and safe and happy and all of these things. And when you have been the one, for the most part, providing that, I mean, their dad's there as well, and he's doing his job as dad, but you're playing that role because that's what I experienced for so long. I was the mom in our house. And so when my stepdaughter went to go live with her mom, that summer that she left to go for the summer and then just never came back, it was like, oh my gosh, like it felt like a piece of me was gone. And we had to grieve that. It really was
Yeah.
painful. And I know yours was, for a period of time while they're on, vacation or hanging out for the summer. But there's still the pain that would be the same as when your biological kid is leaving because you care for them. It is a different kind of love. It's a different kind of feeling, especially like if my kids did leave and go live with their other parents as well. That's, our story. But the feeling that I felt for my stepdaughter when she left, because I did not birth her, will I ever have a chance to be in her life again? Whereas with my children, when they left, I'm their mom always. Like they're kind of forced to always recognize me in that position, And so there are these other kind of feelings that come along with it that doesn't feel as permanent of a love
Yeah.
with your stepchild. And so it's more fragile. Like, am I going to lose this? Are they going to lose it? So I totally get that, even in the short period of time. But those fears, I mean, they're valid. They come up, and then we have to learn and deal and move forward and process and understand and reassure ourselves and not live in the fear of all of the what ifs. So I'm glad that you had the friend that spoke truth to you during that time, and you didn't just let that just seep in. And then there's this whole transition period. I don't know if your kids went through it, but I know with my stepdaughter, anytime she would come back, I became usually the object of her frustration or distaste. And so I got some backlash from that. Did you experience any of that?
I didn't, thankfully. I was worried. I like again, you don't know how it's going to go when they come back. And so I think there were a lot of fears just because of the unknown that I was putting in my head. I what if they didn't come back like that? Like they're not going to come back because they're young, but obviously, but like they are. But that was a fear. And then yeah, but that was like, what if they come back and they want nothing to do with me? But I didn't. I'm very thankful that that was not our case, because I think that would have been really hard.
Yeah. Well, and then as you're going through it, you learn how to give them space during that time and transition through it. And especially you have 3 children that are all going through it, whereas we had one and she didn't have anybody else
Right.
experiencing those emotions along with her. So they have each other to kind of talk and process through as well. And so you said the kids are thriving. What
Yep.
are some positive things that you've seen for your family unit now that y'all are in a different area, maybe that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I think, we've really relied on one another more. I feel like we feel more like a family unit. Um, I thought that I would move here and just like introduce myself as the kid's mom. But I still find myself acknowledging, I'm their stepmom, which is interesting because, obviously in our situation previously, I always identified that because there were times that their mom would pick them up from school. And so I needed to identify, and I thought, well, she really won't pick them up here, so I can say that. But I think it's made me, for me personally, I felt more comfortable in my role. I don't feel as shamed by it. And I can just, confidently say, yeah, I'm their stepmom, and, we have them full time. But I think we've all relied on each other in a very different way that we didn't have to. We had my family back home, his family was there, her family was there. So we relied on other people. And so here it's like, okay, kids have 2 different sports at 2 different places. We've got to divide and conquer. And my husband and I have to communicate a little more. Whereas I could call my mom and be like, Mom, I need your help. I can't do that now. So really we have relied on one another. And I think it's made us stronger as a family unit.
Yeah, I could see that too. Cause even just in my first family, when I was married before and he was military, so we moved to California and I birthed my daughter in California with no support, around during that time. And there was something that just bonded us during that time because we had to rely on each other versus when we came and we moved back when he got out of the military and I'm back here and now we're around all our friends
Yeah.
and family and everything again. It does it does cause those kind of issues like that. So I could see where now y'all are relying on each other in that area. And then have you had to take any extra steps as far as trying to help them stay connected, not only in your situation, as you're saying, with their mom, but even with their grandparents, where you're being very proactive in that?
Yeah. So with our schedule, they have a weekly FaceTime call with her. Like, what do we do before FaceTime? I don't even know, but they get a weekly FaceTime call with her. And that's with their mom. But, we like kids got Thanksgiving cards from their grandparents, and I'm like, let's call them and thank them, or I'll send photos to their grandparents, just to try to keep them involved. But then outside of their grandparents and their mom, they had friends. So I tell, my daughter, I'm like, why don't you write letters? She's at that perfect age for like pen pals. So I kid you not, every week there's a letter in the mail from one of her friends, and they're like constantly writing back and forth. And so, and I think those are the type of things that I prior to moving, when everyone said we were doing such a bad thing by pulling these kids away, I always felt like how much stronger my kids are going to be, because they're going to have had the opportunity to branch out and meet new people and learn how to keep contact with friends that, they leave behind, and that just because you move away doesn't mean you lose friends, and just teaching them those type of life lessons. And I really feel like they've adapted to that. They know that they can call their mom or their grandparents or anyone for that matter whenever they want. My mom, they're whoever. We've never been like, oh no, you cannot call. So and we were like that even in California. So I think just for them feeling confident and knowing that it's the same, you pick up the phone and call, FaceTime, whatever you want. And I think that that's been uh, just very like reassuring for them.
Yeah, and in some of those relationships, because we joke, my mother-in-law lives like 15 minutes away, and we feel like we see my other mother-in-law, Randall's stepmom, more because she lives further away. We have to be more intentional and
Right.
plan trips and go, when we're there, all the time, not just having over for dinner or something. So in a way that
Yeah.
when when you live apart, you do become a little more intentional in connecting in those ways. And so I'm interested to see how y'all continue that in your kids as they grow and mature. Like, what are some ways? Because there are some different ways out there now with technology the way it is, that you can still, and we learned that through COVID, right? That there's
Right.
ways to connect and hang out even when you're not in the same like house with each other. And so before we wrap this up, something new that we started here with Enjoying Your Blended Family is I like to ask at the end, like, what is something that your family enjoys doing together that you feel like really like connects y'all and bonds you?
We're a pretty competitive family. So I think anything that has us being active, we love football, love football. So playing football, watching football. But since we've moved here, the new thing is going out on the boat and fishing. That has been just I've not been a big fisherman,
Fisherwoman.
before, fisherwoman. But I don't know. It's just something about all of us just on the boat, and we've got music going, and we're casting a line, and we're all kind of doing it separate, but together. And we're just excited to just be near each other. And so it doesn't feel like it has to be constant communication or this, that, and the other, but we're just there together and kind of doing our own thing, but together. And I think that's been our new enjoyment.
So did y'all have to buy a boat when you got there?
So we actually, surprising, we live right by a lake. The big thing are boat clubs out here. So you don't have to buy a boat. Thank you, praise Jesus, because they are not cheap. But you are part of a boat club, and you can just access a boat by reservation up to 4 times consecutively. And it's been awesome. Like, we got at the very end of summer, which I'm excited to like really hit the ground running come summer. But yeah, the kids, they just think it's the best thing ever, and they're little boat babies. So yeah, it just a boat club, and it's like the best thing. So
Wow, yeah, I've never heard of that. And so as I've started asking these questions, just hearing what different families are doing, and then it shares those ideas with other people, because I would have never thought about being in a boat club. I would just think like, oh, you got to go out and buy a boat. That's like
right.
somewhere between a car and a house, right? Like it's a big investment.
Yeah, and you got to clean it. And this, they have it ready for you. You get on, you take it out, you bring it back, and you say, see you next time. And it's perfect, especially for having 4 kids. And I can't imagine cleaning a boat after being on the boat all day. That would not be fun. So,
Yeah, our neighbors have a boat, and it's very stinky when they're out cleaning the boat as
yeah.
well. So but that is so cool that y'all are able to bond on that, and so different from what y'all were doing before as well. And these new experiences that you're getting. That's what we always say. Like, find common interests, things that you can do together, things, either all of y'all like to do together, or even just building those certain relationships within your family of things that you like to do. But trying new experiences are those things that will create those core memories that they will take forever. And so I love that. Is there anything that you want to share with our B.FAM here before we close it out?
No, I love to connect with different stepmoms and blended families. So please feel free to reach out to me on social media. Instagram's the best for me just because I am always on it. But yeah, I'd love to connect and just hear about your blend, and look forward to connecting.
Nice. And you're also a coach as well, certified
Yes.
coach. So
Yes, I am.
if
you
you are listening to Joslynn talk and you're like, man, I relate so much to her. She's gone through the things that, I would just love to be able to talk with her. That is actually an option.
Yes.
Something. So find her, the Daily Stepmom, on Instagram, and send her a DM and let her know. You can also Google the Daily Stepmom and it pops up. She has over 70 episodes on her podcast. So you can go back. I love when I find someone new on a podcast. I reverse the order and I go right from the beginning, and I love to just like binge all of their things. So whatever you got going on here lately during the holidays, if you're like, man, I want to know more of her story, go and hear, and you're going to hear how things probably, I'm sure, have progressed over time. And Joslynn's getting back into the flow of normal life. And so the episodes have been a little bit on a pause for right now, but figuring out what's next there. But there's at least 70 I saw when I just looked it up real quick. So there's plenty of stuff in there for you to go get caught up on it before the new ones come out. So for sure, go and connect in those ways. And then you never know when we have someone on the podcast. I like to do some collaborations on Instagram. So you might just see her and I doing a little bit of dance and stuff, and just sharing a few more tips with you guys when it comes to living in different states with your kids or your stepkids. And so be on the lookout for that. And until next time, guys, I just want to say goodbye. Thanks for listening to us here at Enjoying Your Blended Family. And remember to go out there and find those things that you can do with your family that can cause those experiences, and lean on each other. Get creative, think outside of the box, and then just through the hard times, which is what I think Joslynn has said that she's learned today, through these different steps. There's not necessarily anything that she would go back and be able to do differently, but she's learned for herself and grown in herself on like, okay, this is what I need to do for me and my family. And so just take that for what it is, and choose that what works best for your family. And until next time, enjoy your blended family. Bye, guys. Thanks for joining us today. We hope this episode has been a blessing and encouraged your family journey.
Make sure you stay connected with us and join our weekly Blended Family newsletter. We send an email out every Friday morning full of support and encouragement.
And when you join, we also want to give you a free gift. So go get yours today. The link is in the show notes below.
Have an amazing day. Remember to enjoy the journey with your blended family, and we'll see you on the next episode.